everyone. Welcome to the limited edition leadership show. My name is Paula Dunn, and I specifically work with teenage girls to help them create confidence to conquer life. Now, today, I'd love to introduce you to the fabulous, the wonderful Michelle Duval. She is the founder and CEO of Fingerprint for Success. And for those that don't know what Fingerprint for Success is, let me tell you. It is a people analytics and artificial intelligence coaching platform for entrepreneurs and business owners. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Paula. I'm so delighted to be with you and your audience.
Thank you, thank you. I want to have her discuss the entrepreneurial mindset and the importance of it during these times of disruption in teenagers. So, Michelle, what are your thoughts and experience? Why is that really important right now?
Thank you so much, Paula. Well, the first thing I'd say is I'll just tell all of you listening in a little bit about some research that we did. So I've been working with entrepreneurs. So an entrepreneur is anyone who starts a business from scratch. And I've been working with those folk for more than 20 years. And some of them have started their businesses and sold their businesses for, $10 million, $100 million, $200, multi-billion dollars. So these are some of the people who've been the most successful in the world. And then I've worked with some other people who really struggled to start their business or their businesses actually failed. And I was super fascinated that I was working with these incredible people. And the entrepreneurs are some of the most exciting, creative people, obviously, aren't they, Paula?
Oh, yes.
In the world. And they're so much fun to work with. And you might not even realise that you yourself might already be an entrepreneur, but we'll get to that in a moment. And so we studied these people to see what was the X factor. Why were some people so successful, and some were failing? And so these are some of the things that we found. And I myself have started several businesses, and this current business, Fingerprint for Success, is a global technology company. And so I've been on that entrepreneurial journey as well of raising money and scaling our product. We're now in 80 different countries. Great. So I think particularly for those of you who are at school and studying, you can feel sometimes really different and wonder, why am I different to the rest of the group? No one seems to understand me. And I'm trying to be put into this round hole when I'm a square, or I'm a round thing into a square hole, whatever the expression is.
Yeah.
But you'll know that if that's yourself, if that's you. And what we found is that entrepreneurial thinkers are the ones who are able to thrive in times of crisis. Some of the biggest, best, most successful companies or inventions in the world were created during times of crisis. There was some research recently that showed, I'm not sure if it was research, but maybe it was just a meme on some social media that showed that Albert Einstein found his formula for relativity, I think it was, during some confinement that he himself was in. So incredible things can come out of really, really difficult times. And so some of the thinking is that I don't need to be perfect. So one of the things we found in our research was that successful entrepreneurs have a very high bias for what we call is initiation. So initiation is the motivation to take the first step on something when you have done no research, when you know nothing about it, but you're just going to take the first steps, and you're going to learn through taking action. So you'll take the first step, then take the second step, then the third step without pausing.
Yeah. That's really a really awesome and fantastic attitude to have, because I find that a lot of teenagers, especially females, and when they're really young, they're very hesitant, very cautious about taking a step, because it's like, we have all these internal chatter in our heads going, oh, I'm not good enough, or I don't want to be judged, I don't want to be criticized, I don't want to be made a fool, I don't want to fail. So there's so many of these internal triggers within us that's preventing us from taking that initiation forward. So it's really wonderful to really embrace that, and that there's actual research and backing behind the fact to have that high initiation, and just having the guts to just go, dial it down, that internal chatter, and just go for it and see what happens.
Absolutely. And what the other part of what was correlated with it, so correlation, guys, just simply means that it's connected. There's a relationship between these two things. And so it was found to have a connection with people being more successful, making significant amounts of money from those businesses, and that they were able to hire more people, they were able to expand their products more globally and so on. So the ability to take action and not even know the next step after that is actually the success factor.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
it's kind of ironic because at school they kind of teach you to be so thorough, and that's because they wanted to develop that so you have that skill for life. But to be able to develop, being able to take those steps and just trusting yourself that you'll figure it out as you go. In psychology, that's known as self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is the belief in yourself you can figure something out. So I've never flown an aircraft, right? But I'm a pretty mean driver. My very first goal when I was at high school was to be a racing car driver.
I love it.
And I wanted to be the first woman who ever had won Bathurst. You know, that Bathurst big full day event?
Yeah.
And that was my first life's goal. Now, I never actually went on to do it because I ended up getting into business and following that path.
Yeah.
You know, we've all got different goals, and I love driving, and I know that if I had to drive a bus or I had to drive a plane, I'd eventually be able to do it. So self-efficacy is the belief that you don't know it now, but you can figure it out as you go.
Yeah. Is it sort of like that intuition where you think, it's like for those going for a role that they haven't had the opportunity to learn or tick every single box. And us as women, we kind of like to, before we apply for a role, we want to make sure we can do 100% of what they've put out there. But if you know inside yourself that you know that if you're given the chance, you can actually do it, that is self-efficacy.
Absolutely. And the key is we don't need to wait for somebody else to give us permission. So Paula's referring to the research that was done that men will apply for roles that they have little of the experience for, and women, if they don't have one of the things on there, they won't apply for the role thinking they don't have enough experience. And so high initiation is just the belief that I can take this step. Obviously, you're not going to lie. You're not going to lie.
No, but you know in yourself.
But you know in yourself, those men will be applying for the role knowing that they'll get to the interview and they'll just wow the person.
Yeah.
So it's just giving yourself permission. You don't have to wait for your parents, your school teachers, or your friends to give you permission. You just be the one who says, you know what, I'm going to give this a go.
It's inspiring. And correct me if I'm wrong, but having that high initiation has nothing to do with IQ, correct?
Absolutely. Nothing to do with IQ. It's just all about the belief that it's okay if I fail. So this is the thing that helps us during times of crisis. I don't know how many of you are finding that some days during this current corona crisis, some days you might be feeling really good and you're high on top of the world, you can do anything. Then the next afternoon or the next day, you feel like, oh my God, I can't cope with this anymore. It's all too hard. All of the restrictions are too hard and all of those things. Now that's normal in life that we go like this, but we're just experiencing it really concentrated. And when you're in a crisis or in times of difficulty and disruption, it can be very, very intense. And so it's normal for us to take steps. Sometimes they'll work out. Sometimes we'll take steps and we'll fail dismally. And the distinction is that we just get up and we take the next step. And that's the distinction of people who thrive during difficult times. Is it doesn't matter who laughed at us. It doesn't matter if we failed in front of everybody, or we did let down our parents even in trying to do something worthwhile. We just get ourselves back up and we follow that strong, what we call internal reference.
Love it.
So one of the research findings was that successful startup people have this very strong internal criteria for how to make decisions. This is versus what we call external reference. So external reference is where I really like to trust other people's opinions. Now, you'll know if this is you because if you're high on external reference, what other people think of you, what your friends think of you, what your teachers say, what your parents say, you'll feel compelled to follow their advice. Versus the internal reference person is more of the rebel, and that's the person who goes, well, you all think that, but I know this. They trust their gut feel, they trust their intuition, they have their own criteria for making a decision. And if it means going against the crowd, they'll feel comfortable to do that. Now both groups will be very successful in life. Those who have the internal reference are more naturally suited to disrupting things, creating new paths, being the inventors, being the people who create the things in the world. So we found that was correlated with more success in that area.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, for me, I've spent most of my life being the external reference, and being an entrepreneur, it can be quite challenging to have that extreme external reference when you're trying to develop and build something that no one knows about, or they can't see your vision yet, and you've got to try and stay within yourself and know yourself that if you keep persisting, it will eventually get there. So yeah, I definitely can feel that pain of for those of us who like to compare ourselves to others. Yeah, absolutely.
I remember that I was one of the very earliest professional coaches in the world. So I started my first business. Now everyone's going to go, gosh, that was forever. Some of you weren't even born. Most of you probably were not even born then. But I started my first business in 1997, and I decided that I was going to be a professional coach. And in those days, people didn't know what a life coach or an executive coach or a leadership coach was. They just thought, what sports team do you coach? And so I'd say hi to people and they'd say, like, what are you doing? And I said, I'm going to build a business that helps people to change their life and to realize their potential and become and be all that they could possibly be. And people said, there's no way that you can do that. There's no way that you'll ever build a business around that. And here I am all this time later building multiple businesses around it. But I cannot tell you every week that someone tells me, you can't do what you're doing. What's your right? Who are you to be doing that? And as girls, I think we don't realize that we can be and do absolutely everything. But the deciding factor is that you first inside of yourself know that. Yeah,
and it's really challenging. It's really difficult to I mean, it's taken me a long time, and I'm in my early 40s now where I've really embraced who I am. So hopefully for you, the young ladies, it won't take you as long as it has for me. But yes. So what's another tip, another really great entrepreneurial tool that teens can use right now?
Awesome. Next one is big picture thinking. So big picture thinking is where you're comfortable with vague, abstract things and where you're not necessarily motivated for concrete, specific details. Now, at school, I know that you're probably being taught that you need to be very detail orientated. Now, there's lots of subjects and roles in life where being detail orientated is super important. But what we can learn from entrepreneurs is that the reason that entrepreneurs can thrive during difficult times is because they're looking always out for the big picture, which means they're looking for trends. They're looking for what's the priorities. So an example of the big picture is holding true to what the goal might be rather than getting distracted by all of the details that are going on. So the big picture is thinking in big chunks of information. And when we think in the big picture, we're looking for the global overview. We're wanting to get the gist of something. We're wanting to see what the themes are rather than details. And when we get into all the details, it's very easy to get really, really overwhelmed. If I look at all the subjects and study that I have to do, we can lose sight of the bigger picture about what the goal is of that subject, or what the goal is of this term at school, or what the goal of this phase is that you're actually in. So the big picture allows you at this stage in your life to be able to go, okay, what's most important right now? And then to be able to work towards those goals. We found that big picture thinking means that you can move faster. And when we're in times of crisis, it really helps us to move quickly, to be able to respond to what's going on in the crisis rather than getting frozen and overwhelmed and stuck in all of the detail.
Yeah, like hoarding toilet paper. Yep. Yeah, actually, it's quite interesting that you talked about that, because when I was in high school, it was so true that having to learn so many concepts and so many details, and I found it very overwhelming for myself, and at times I used to think that I was really dumb, and I didn't realize till years later that I have a natural preference for big picture thinking. So the reason why I used to get lost in the detail was because at school, they didn't speak the language that I needed to communicate. So if they'd explained to me big picture first and then helped me drill down into the detail, it would have been much easier for me to consume and to retain the information and to learn. But I've learned to do that over time, and it was through trial and error. And it wasn't until I met Michelle about 4 years ago and got involved in Fingerprint for Success and realized my own attitudes and motivations to work and learning, which I was able to, I guess, sharpen the saw, and I think that's what's really so powerful about the tool that you've developed and created, Michelle, because it does give you that accuracy as opposed to a standard life coach that you go and speak to them and they're asking you questions that you may not even know the answers to because you haven't been able to dig deep down enough for yourself to know those answers. But whereas the analytical tool that Michelle has created through 15 years of research actually shows some, tangible metrics, especially if you like your stats and your numbers. It actually gives you that, and hence the fingerprint, because no result is identical. It's like a fingerprint. So I think it's fantastic. So so we've talked about three attitudes. What's another one? What's a fourth one that you'd like to talk about?
A fourth attitude, which would be really helpful. Well, there's so many because we've got 48. So choosing which ones which would have the biggest impact would be, the next one would be around goal orientation. So some of us are motivated towards a vision, a target, a goal, the purpose, the mission. Yes. And some of us are more motivated away from what we call problems, where we want to solve problems in advance. So we're very strategic thinkers. We're like, but if you do that, this will be the problem, this will be the consequence, and you get energy from all of those things. So you're the person who leaves your assignments or your study prep, your exam prep to the very last minute, and then you do all-nighters or whatever. Now, you're motivated by what we call away from problems. You're motivated away from failing the exam or whatever it is, right? Yes. Versus the goal of hitting my target and getting, whatever the result is that you're trying to get. Mm-hmm. So we found that those who thrive inside of these challenging times are very goal-orientated. So they set themselves goals for each day or each hour or for the week or for the month or for whatever it is, and they incrementally work towards those milestones. Yeah. And that helps them to stay focused. So when you think about what we've all been going through during COVID, the days could all blur into one, with so many competing things going on in your home, between all of yourselves figuring out how to get online and to do your online study and figuring out those super big questions around what am I going to study next year and what's the impact of this if you happen to be in year 12, what's it all going to mean? Yeah. And so the big thing about goals is that irrespective of what's going on, you can still be focused on your goal. So your goal might be whatever it is. So when I was in my last year of school, when I was doing year 12, I had done in my days, I did a trial HSC, and I'm not sure.
We did that. I did that.
Trial HSC, and I was convinced that I was going to get a really good result, and I got what would have been a fail for my whole HSC, and I was absolutely, I can't tell you how shocked I was. I just wasn't expecting it. And I was never the top student, but I was never the lowest student. No. So I just wasn't expecting that could be the case. And so I only had 6 weeks in between to be able to get my marks to be increased. So I set myself a goal, and then I set myself out a daily and weekly planner. And I set out in there the goals of what amount of study I would do each day, when I'd see my friends. I was doing acting and drama at the same time. I was the captain of the netball team. So I had to do, you know what I mean? I had to do.
Very busy.
I was very, very busy.
Yep.
And so I had all of these things, but I set out this planner, which allowed me to be able to go and make sure that every day I was working towards the goals, which was having enough time with friends, being able to do all my sport, but to make sure I did my study. And so it meant that with all of those things in my life, I was happy, but I was meeting my goals of the things that were most important to me. And when it came to doing the actual HSC, I increased my results by over 250 marks.
That's fantastic.
Which was an incredible outcome, and it meant I could get into any of the courses that I wanted to do. And that was just in a 6-week period of using goals.
So for those of you that are a bit shying away from setting goals, you hear it first from Michelle Duval that goals actually do work. So thank you for that. So moving along, how can parents help their teens? Because obviously people our age are more in the stability, trying to find that control, that certainty, as opposed to that entrepreneurial mindset. So how can parents sort of shift away from that so they can encourage their children to thrive in these uncertain times by building the resilience? Because what you was talking about all this time, it's not just an entrepreneurial mindset, but it's about creating control out of this chaos and building certainty within, and minimizing or creating this creating resilience as well. And I think they're some of the really great attributes that entrepreneurial mindset actually develops.
Yeah, great. So I would suggest that parents actually listen to those 3 tips that we just went through, of initiation, of big picture thinking, and on this concept of goals. And for parents, if we start backwards and work through goals, if you can, as a family, have some goals, and that if you create those goals together as a family, you can figure out weekly goals as a family that we're going to experience or create or do certain things together, and then helping your team to be able to figure out, well, what are their goals? Now, if they've never thought about goals, it's going to be really difficult at first to think and to give themselves permission to go after goals. So being able to create it as a family culture, not just for your teens, but for other children if you've got them as well, can be a really fun way to set up the week, and then to track progress during the week, and then at the end of the week to be able to do a review of the goals. That's the first one. The second one is big picture thinking. Don't sweat the small stuff with your team. Get really, really clear on what the vision and what the big picture is of what's most important priority. And the most important priority usually during these very difficult times is that your teen has good mental health, that they're eating, that they're sleeping, and that they are getting some sort of exercise of some kind, and that they're able to be set up into an environment where they can at least have the resources to be able to do the work that they want to do. But the bigger picture is that. And if we get caught up in all of the detail, we put in unnecessary anxiety into yourself as a parent, but into your children during these difficult times, and putting unrealistic expectations on people. And the third one is that initiation. So really, if you can cultivate in your family culture the opportunity for your teen to be able to initiate things, which might be, hey, I want to move my room around, or let's redesign the kitchen. Not the kitchen, the lounge room. Whatever it might be, these are all acts of your team flexing that muscle of initiation. If you can acknowledge it, work with it, and encourage them, it's going to be the most extraordinary leadership tool for their life. And you can encourage this by setting up little games and activities as a whole family for, okay, it's your turn to initiate dinner tonight. It's your turn to initiate whatever it's going to be, and really build that into your team.
I think that's awesome. There's really great tips, because if you get your teen to develop that initiation and that drive, there's less time for the parent to badger them to say, do your homework, do this and do that, because you're developing them on a daily basis to do that naturally. So that's fantastic. So look, today has been very illuminating. Thank you so much for giving us some top tips on creating that entrepreneurial mindset, especially during times of disruption, in which we are in now, and probably the start of many more years to come. And so, look, where can people find you if they want to know more about what you do and Fingerprint for Success? Where can they locate you?
Thank you, Paula. Well, they can locate me through your website. So maybe you can tell everybody about your website and where they can find F4S.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for being part of my show today, and I really appreciate your time, and hopefully everyone's able to make their marks today. And don't forget, thank you all, and don't forget to be you, have courage, and live life without limits.